Good morning, St. Cat's. I was told by my friend I can say that. To Reverend Eunice, thank you so much for the opportunity. To my friends, my family, those of you in attendance, I appreciate your warm welcome. It's been great, the whole service. I thank you for the opportunity to talk about Juneteenth. I thank you for the opportunity to talk about freedom. I'm grateful for both. I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk about our shared history. Because whether our ancestors came here on slave ships or on immigrant ships or some other journey, the American story belongs to all of us. Can I get an amen, somebody? Amen. Today, I stand before you as the first African-American female mayor in the history of the city of Mullins. Church, I say that because history matters, because our journeys matter, because little boys and little girls need to know that progress is indeed possible. I say it because every blessing we enjoy today was paid for by someone who came before us. I stand on the shoulders of people whose names I know, and some names I will never know. And that is why it is so important that we always remember where we came from. Because if we forget our history, we lose appreciation for our everyday blessings. If we forget our history, we take freedoms for granted. If we forget our history, we may fail to protect those freedoms for generations to come. So today, I want to talk about freedom. Freedom not as an idea, not as a slogan, but freedom as a journey that began before any of us was born. A journey that traveled through chains, through slavery, through Reconstruction, through segregation, through civil rights, and into the present day. And it's a journey that brings us from Galveston, Texas, all the way to Mullins, South Carolina. The title of my message today is Juneteenth, From Galveston to Mullins, A Story of Freedom. So I'm going to read for you today in the New American Version, Galatians 5:1. And it says, "For freedom Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit again to the yoke of slavery." Those words remind us that freedom is precious. Freedom requires perseverance. Freedom requires remembrance. Freedom requires community. And freedom requires us to stand together. Now, throughout my, I'm gonna say journey into public service, I've adopted a little phrase, and this phrase is stronger together. I believe it deep down in my heart. So I'm gonna need your help getting through this morning, all right? So whenever I say stronger, I like for you guys to say together. Can you do that for me? All right, let's practice. Stronger.
Together.
Stronger.
Together.
All right, y'all got it. So nothing that's happening in America today is happening in a vacuum. Nothing that's happening in South Carolina today is happening in a vacuum. Nothing that's happening in Mullins today is happening in a vacuum. We rise stronger.
Together.
We heal stronger.
Together.
We build communities stronger.
Together.
And yes, we protect freedom stronger.
Together.
When Paul says, "Do not submit again to the yoke of slavery," he's speaking about more than the physical bondage. Slavery can be physical, but slavery can be a state of mind. Fear can enslave us. Hatred can enslave us. Division can enslave us. Bitterness can enslave us. Prejudice can enslave us. The belief that we are powerless can enslave us. The belief that we are too different to work together can enslave us. But Christ says, be free. And freedom calls us to community. Freedom calls us to be stronger.
Together.
So go with me, if you will, January 1st, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. But history tells us something important. The proclamation did not automatically produce freedom. Think about the time. The Civil War was raging. News traveled very slow. And in many places, people remained enslaved. Then came April 1865, when General Robert E. Lee surrendered. And this effectively ended the Civil War. But 6 days later, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. Think about the uncertainty of that moment. A nation devastated by war, a president murdered, millions of formerly enslaved people wondering what happens now. Are we truly free? Will the promises be kept? And even then, some people remained enslaved. Then came June 19th, 1865. Union troops arrived in Galveston, Texas. Among those troops were 2,000 African American soldiers. Pause there for a minute. Imagine what 2,000 African American soldiers would have looked like. All wearing the uniform of the United States of America. African American men riding into Texas. African American men carrying authority, carrying dignity, and carrying freedom. Many of the enslaved people in Galveston had never seen Black soldiers before. And before that first Juneteenth, life for Africans in America was brutal. Families were sold apart, children separated from their parents, people whipped, beaten, abused, even killed. They were denied education, denied ownership of their labor, denied control over their own bodies, denied basic human dignity. And then, here comes freedom, y'all. Those Black soldiers announced, "You are free." Can you imagine hearing those words? You're free. Your children are free. Your family is free. Your future is free. Those soldiers, they looked like freedom. They sounded like freedom. They represented freedom. And history tells us that the people of Galveston did not wait. They celebrated immediately. They prayed, they sang, they danced, they embraced one another. Families started searching for loved ones. They were finally free. It was a celebration. It was a praise service. It was a testimony. Because they understood something that we must never forget. Freedom is a gift from God and our responsibility to one another. Stronger?
Together.
Now, I wish I could tell you after June 19th, 1865, everything became happily ever after. It did not. Freedom came, equality did not. Citizenship came, justice did not fully come. Voting rights existed on paper, but barriers remained. So now let's go back. We'll go back to January of 1865, before the first Juneteenth. General Sherman issued Special Field Order number 15. This is where we get the phrase 40 acres and a mule. So for a brief moment, formerly enslaved people could imagine owning land and building lives of independence. But the path was not easy. I'm going to introduce you to a man whose life reminds us that freedom is never abstract. Freedom has names. Freedom has faces. Freedom has stories. His name was Putu Goshalar. Putu is the son of an African chief. He was kidnapped, placed on a slave ship, brought to eventually what would become Mullins, South Carolina. You know what amazes me about Putu is that he never changed his name. That's powerful. I believe he remembered who he was, the son of a chief. He remembered where he came from. I believe he understood his dignity. He was saying to everyone then and all of us now, you may enslave my body, but you cannot erase my identity. Documented history tells us that General Sherman's march through South Carolina, Putu was an older free man at the time, and he was helping to bury valuables belonging to his enslavers, fearing the approaching Union Army. Think about that. A man denied his own freedom, standing on the edge of history. General Sherman, just right in our state, not too far away, freedom was marching toward him. Perhaps he couldn't see it yet. Perhaps he didn't know exactly what was coming, but history was moving. God was moving, and another season was approaching. Ecclesiastes says, to everything there is a season and a time and a purpose under the heaven. Putu had endured a season of bondage, but another season was coming, y'all. A season of hope, a season of freedom, a season that will allow his descendants to become educators, business owners, doctors, lawyers, high-ranking military, and yes, even elected officials. Putu never received his 40 acres. He never received the full promise that America had briefly placed in front of him. But he left something even greater, a legacy. A legacy that says you can survive what was meant to destroy you. A legacy that says your identity is greater than your oppression. A legacy that says God can take pain and produce purpose. That is Juneteenth. That is resilience. That is perseverance. That is being stronger. Together. And then there was Miss Phyllis Jordan. She was born into slavery in the 1830s and enslaved for 45 years in a prominent home to a prominent family in Mullins. She was a nurse, a midwife, and a giant in her community. She was a victim of slavery. She was a witness to emancipation, Reconstruction, segregation, Jim Crow. History was not something she read. History was something she lived. Because people like Putu and Miss Jordan endured, we have opportunities they never could have imagined. From the celebrations of that very first Juneteenth, it took 100 years to pass the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. 100 years. 100 years of intimidation. 100 years of literacy tests. 100 years of poll taxes. 100 years of violence. 100 years of barriers. 100 years of obstacles. 100 years of finding new ways to limit participation and silent voices. Think about that. An entire century. Then came the Civil Rights era, and ordinary people like us did extraordinary things. People marched, prayed, people crossed bridges, people sat at lunch counters, people went to jail, and people lost their lives. But church, African Americans never did it alone. The story of America has never been written by one race, by one community, or one generation. Yes, African Americans led the fight for our own freedom. We had to. Our very own lives depended on it. But church, they didn't fight alone. Yes, the abolitionist movement was led by giants such as Frederick Douglass, Sojourner Truth, and Harriet Tubman. And yes, the civil rights and voting rights movements were led by extraordinary people such as Martin Luther King, Congressman John Lewis, and Fannie Lou Hamer. But There were also allies who stepped up to do the right thing. President Abraham Lincoln, William General Sherman, Susan B. Anthony, Reverend James Reeb, Andrew Goodman, and so many more. People who simply chose to do what was right. People who decided that justice mattered more than popularity. People who understood that the measure of our character is not where we stand when it's easy, but where we stand when it's difficult. Black and white Americans stood together. They marched together. They prayed together. They organized together. They worshiped together. And in some cases, they died together. Because they believed the promise of democracy belongs to everyone. Church, that's the lesson of Juneteenth. Freedom moves forward when people of goodwill choose each other over division. Freedom moves forward when we recognize our shared humanity. Freedom moves forward when we remember that none of us can build a beloved community by ourselves. Freedom moves forward when good people stand on the right side of history. We are stronger, together. Stronger, together. And because we are stronger together, we can preserve freedom together. We can protect voting rights together. We can build our stories together. We can build a future together. Stronger? Together. The Voting Rights Act recognized something history had already taught us. That was, rights that exist on paper can still be denied in practice. Democracy works best when everyone's voice can be heard. Every vote counted. Because democracy works best when people participate. Democracy works best when people are engaged. Democracy works best when people understand freedom requires responsibility. Regardless of your political affiliation, I hope we can agree on one thing, and that's voting matters. Stronger? Together. So y'all, Juneteenth is not a Black holiday. Juneteenth is an American story because African American history is an American history. Your freedom does not diminish mine, and my freedom does not diminish yours. When we learn each other's stories, relationships become stronger. We become stronger together. I believe that Putu Goshala would have understood that. I believe that Miss Phyllis Jordan would have understood that. I believe that the formerly enslaved people in Galveston would understand that. I believe those 2,000 American soldiers who delivered the news of freedom would have understood that, because every one of them knew something that we must never forget. Freedom is never merely about ourselves. Freedom calls us to remember. Freedom calls us to protect human dignity. Freedom calls us to work together. Freedom calls us to believe that we need to leave this world better than how we found it. The people of Galveston understood something on June 19, 1865. God's freedom is a gift. Church, freedom is our responsibility. Our responsibility to remember, our responsibility to participate, our responsibility to protect one another, our responsibility to tell the truth about history, our responsibility to leave this country better than we found it. In church, we can only do that stronger, together. Stronger, together. One more time, stronger, together. So let us celebrate freedom. Let's honor history. Let's inspire the future. And may we always be stronger together. Thank you so much.